trayendo un tema sobre otros espacios de producción de conocimiento e innovación. Sabemos que la universidad y que los espacios...
We know that universities and research institutions are those spaces that are recognized as relevant knowledge producing institutions, and they have an impact on public policy and the development of new technologies. Today, we want to share experiences that amplify that vision and that involve new actors in the production of knowledge and innovation. We are going to begin with the experience of our partner, Juan David Reina, who comes from the field of engineering, and his contribution is called Other Technosciences and Engineering for the Construction of Peace. He's a researcher in Colombia, and he's also part of a collective called Enraizando. Juan David, you'll have 15 to 20 minutes for your presentation. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Anne. Thanks, Francisco. Thank you all for joining us so you can participate and maybe allow yourselves to be influenced by some of these ideas. This is a basic presentation of this project that we're beginning, which is financed for the Colombian-German Institution for Peace, Technical University of Berlin also, and the National University of Colombia are sponsors to this project. The intention here is to think how our education systems, especially these disciplines that are formed in closed spaces. This is an opportunity to create open science. We need to think about open processes, epistemologically open and ontologically open. I like to think that we can open new ways of creating knowledge. This is not a logocentric thing that stems from data, texts, and numbers, but mostly it should be about a relationship. Engineering and information and all these things in the doctorate courses, we have seen this process that there is a strong trend to work absent of all these contexts that are apolitical, not in the implications of this artifact. The team that accompanies me and that I am part of is the National University of Colombia. There are illustrators that Ander Hernandez, Lucia Alvarez, and Rebaire from the Technical University of Berlin. In this context and other countries, we are envisioning how to lead this engineering, military vision of engineering. We do believe that this practice, this military practice and patriarchal practices from the 18th century are still in place. We see them in courses, in the way that this discipline is put forward. When you take engineering courses all over the world, they are like always the same, and they are conceived from the same point. We need to break this idea that there is only one way to do this monotechnical and monotechnological idea from the Western world. In Jamaica, I talked about mono-humanity. It's a one-sided humanity that is implanted by the colonialist ideas, that is secular and white, this kind of mankind, uniform, that is breaking our ties to the territories. We need to leave behind this idea that technique is not connected to human sciences. The scientific practice is not isolated from its context. It's inherently political, social, and cultural. And that's where we come up with new questions, processes, and new ontology and epistemology in these technical scientific proposals. Sometimes we are more sensitive to these new ways of practicing. There are new collaborative models that weren't there. The pandemic has now made it clear that there is more demand for that, for these technological and scientific processes. The vaccine, for example, was one of the most visible examples. This social movement is also a political movement. So we need to think that we are not outsiders. There needs to be a knowledge generation process, and it needs to be considered holistically. When we think that science has open access to a data repository of the results of some research in a logo-centric format, logo paper, etc., we need to think about these things comprehensively. And how can we think about open engineering from the discipline of the engineering? There are many closed processes by this idea of patents and so on, where the merchandization of these things is one common trait of this field. We need to create peace. This isn't about only the absence of conflict or wars, but we need to have a direct connection with social justice. Anywhere in the planet we see lack of social justice. And I think this is where there are several elements that inspire us, from solidarity technology in Brazil, Dangino, Brazil, where they have thought about how these technologies can also contribute to social justice, but also the tachiology, reciprocity among societies. These are reciprocity, deep reciprocity processes and collaboration, very strong processes. This is the idea of lombong. This is an Indonesian language word that interprets the common rice warehouse, the communitary rice warehouse. And this is a metaphor where that includes all these processes of doing all these activities in order to create a common knowledge place. All communities have created their technologies forever. We shouldn't mention only technologies by the conquest or the Western knowledge, but this idea of empirical knowledge that is often not visibilized. There's been a strong relationship from engineering, where we are going to resolve problems. We don't even know which problems or who identifies these problems, who is going to get engaged in the solution of these problems. So we need to question this idea of techno solving. And this is an example among many. Maybe you know it. This is the Book of Family. This is the Cuban process for peace, where the Cuban army in 1990 recognizes the communitary practices of farming, mobility, and by means of telegrams, they gather information of these free practices, and people have this free knowledge and open knowledge, and they start sorting it out in this book, which is called the Family Book, and is distributed to all the population. Many people don't think that this is science because there aren't people from the academia. There are farmers. This is also part of open science, not only, well, with the experts from academia. I already told you a bit about the coming into being of a disciplina, this discipline. We first got to the territories through mega projects, infrastructure engineer, with engineers have a strong role in there, a very important role in peace studies. Engineering is sophisticated in technology creation, but not very sophisticated in the understanding of how this technology is going to be used. And this is an excuse of, well, I only created technology, but I am not responsible for how it is used. We need to promote this idea that the responsibility of science is key, is crucial. And we have done that in Latin America for a long time. There's a lot of questioning around this, but it's just taken for granted for a long time. Many other colleagues in Latin America, we have thought about engaging engineering. Engineering engaged with the emerging societies, emerging communities, practices that make us actually think and rethink and change these design processes and the generation of social and technological systems, and also questioning development. Linear, deterministic development, we are questioning that. That's what we are working on. And in the context of Colombia, in the implementation of the peace agreements, peace accords, how these pedagogical processes, learning processes should help. We need to be there also creating cultural policy for the territories. We need to think about how from these courses and subjects that should be included in students' curricula, the process for peace. Engineers could also complement and create education processes. This is what we are doing. We have been doing this for a month. We want to share this initiative and all these different discussions that are been happening in different places around the world, regionally, internationally, with different actors of people who work these subjects in different territories. There is going to be a systematization of experiences. There is a free platform so that universities or other non-institutional experiences can draw from it and feed from this creation social technical processes. This isn't only about the hope of living in peace socially, but also living in peace with the planet and with ourselves. We don't always think about ourselves as part of those dimensions. There's one conversation that want to leave open. We are part of this magazine, the International Magazine for Engineering and Social Peace. Open access is important there. It has it, and we are always in that discussion. We are rethinking on how to do this open peer revision. We have a new call until November 21st, which is called The Present and Future of Technological Sovereignty. Thinking about what it is, but what it could be. Technological sovereignty. Could they be actually? Plural. Technological sovereignties. We are receiving not only articles, but also prose or tale, literature, photography, all kinds of expressions that can enrich this experience. Giving it a more open and transdisciplinary approach to this topic. It isn't only about absence of violence, but it goes beyond that. Very quickly now, we also need processes in order to rethink peace beyond the absence of conflict. It is only the fact of rejecting declared wars, but we also have to think about engineers as facilitators for social and technical processes. Not the only experts, not that they are the only experts that can create technology and progress in these fields, but they are facilitators. And the idea of resolving ideas. This is the format that we have always believed in. We don't know what we're going to do. We know what the problem is, but we don't know how we're going to solve it. There are plenty of formats. There is a competition for solving issues, but we don't even know what the structure for this is. And the main causes of these issues, we have been treating symptoms for a long time, but never the causes. And also, we need to create institutional and non-institutional teaching and learning products, processes. We haven't thought about the implications and consequences. This is the experience. After I will share these references with you, whether if you want to deepen more into it, and I thank you very much for your participation, and I look forward to our conversation right after the second presentation. Thank you very much, Juan. This is very interesting. I already have questions, and I encourage all of the attendees to share questions by means of our chat. And now we're going to go into Francisca's presentation that comes from the Openlab Ecuador experience, and it seeks to bring and to create other spaces in the university environment for knowledge. So, Francisco, the floor is yours. Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. Can you confirm that you can hear me? All right.
Sí, ¿me confirman si se escucha, por favor?
Sí, te escucho.
Can you confirm that you can hear us? Yes, it's good. Thank you. I am going to share my screen. Well, I will begin by telling you a bit what the Openlab is. The Openlab Foundation, what is it that we do and how we came into being? I think it could be defined as three things. Firstly, it's a social organization. It's a civil society organization, and it has two main axes. To promote open culture and digital culture, and also offer support to those open culture in their development processes as important actors in an social innovation system. We began as a collective group in 2020. It was a group of people who often met in a very dynamic space that existed in Quito City, where there were plenty of activities. A network built around this with different motivations from people with many interests in open source, open data, video games, digital technology, Wikimedia, and so on. We met regularly because we were able to do activities in that place. Since 2019, we had gotten together to talk about this initiative. In 2020, we began to materialize. We began to use the spaces and carry out workshops and labs, and the idea was beginning to take shape. And then the pandemic broke out. Some things weren't as necessary, for example, the physical space. But then we didn't stop there and we continued moving forward. First of all, we needed to find out how we were going to be called and what we were going to do. So at that time, we were going through certain extreme virtuality, which stayed partially what we're talking about March, April, May, and everything went by really quickly. And it was natural that our constitution should be also our domain. So we bought that domain And our anniversary is on the date that we bought our domain, openlab.ec. Well, that's where we are, and we began to do things. We began to put activities in place. These activities about free software, the free Soul Latin American Festival. We did activities on video games, jams, free education, open science, computational thinking, science fiction, and also, well, the most weird subjects, for example, decolonial computation. Looking back after a year, we realized that we had done many activities. We had done many activities on the different topics. Looking back, we have done over 160 activities that, according to our calculations, will be an activity every week, one per week, which is quite a lot. Well, to me, that feels like a lot because I've never been part of a group like this. In 2020, May 2020, we decided to become a, a foundation with a better consolidated team. And now we are of an official foundation with a collective spirit, with certain horizontal structure, horizontality, and that's why we've been able to do so many activities during that time. We also established alliances on the way with this network before Ecolab existed, Openlab existed in these spaces. One of those alliances for Openlab was the Scale Foundation or the Quito Hub Innovation. Firstly, in order to give some context, what is this hub? What is this Quito Innovation Hub? This is a space in the city for articulation. We try to connect the innovation ecosystem with 5 universities in Quito City. We had already done a workshop on how to set up a citizen innovation lab, technological lab, because we are in this context of virtuality, and the idea was to work in different labs jointly with different cities. And the idea about starting a lab in different cities came up. With this alliance with Quito's Hub, well, we decided to do this lab, which had a very positive impact. We wanted to motivate these different 5 cities to do their projects, to put on their projects. So, as an analogy of what happens in a citizen lab, in this case, the cities or the territories, where each of those universities with their own issues, problems, their own culture, and particular aspects that make them unique. Then we would have to start with some specific teams. There is a participatory process in our workshop. There was some information already put in place by the delegates from each university. There would be an executive and directive responsible. They had already identified this access or these needs. And then we sent out a call from which we got 32 proposals. The experts understand that in Ecuador, that would be the first citizen lab created in the context of a university, in a university environment. So we got 32 proposals from researchers, students, administrative personnel, from all those 5 universities, out of which we selected 10. Many of the proposals that didn't succeed were had their focus on things that didn't have a direct connection with the university itself. So they didn't actually have a direct connection with the objective. Finally, there were 2 who deserted, and we stayed with 8 proposals with which the process ended. As methodology indicates, this bid for collaborators, we got around 150 some people who wanted to join for to offer their collaboration to the projects. And that's where we began working with them, and the idea was to create diverse groups. It was a challenge for us to have teams where there should be people from different disciplines, not only engineering or human sciences. It should also be multi-institutional, not teams from not only one institution, also gender equality, and also not only students or faculty, but a mix. It was a challenge for us to form these teams. And the second challenge, after the evaluation, after studying everybody's profiles, the second part was to get them to join, get them to get together, and the actual exchange would take place. The other lab is on the data expedition lab. Lab expedition, data expedition is a special technology that seeks to work with this data openly in order to do exploration processes that entail learning processes, and at the end we will have data. We wanted to apply this in LabKey. Here there was no problem that we wanted to solve at the heart of the universities. What we wanted to do here, if we call it that way, would be the lack of knowledge about working with data. We could work with people reasonably experienced, but we could also work with people whose first time working with data were this. We had the option of focusing on the results, and many people who hadn't had a contact with data, it would be their first place, so we would focus it that way. The disadvantage there is that the experts, the more experienced people, are going to get tired. They aren't going to be willing to participate. And in the end, to our surprise, many experts decided to stay so I can support the teams. Even though everything had been defined and that the objective was clear, that we needed to focus on people working with data for the first time. And many experts stayed and they offered their support to the teams. And this is where we did something similar. We set up teams with similar criteria from previous labs. We didn't focus on only 5 participants per team. We opened it a little more because there are people who leave, who quit at some point, and it was an evolution process and a learning process, 100% learning. Every day there would be a task. This wasn't a contest where some were going to win and some were going to lose. Everyone would put forward their stories and their learning process. And this was beautiful. Well, and now, near the wrap up, I would say that the path that we are treading is very interesting because we are going to go on. And right now, we want to support communities. We have established alliances with some organizations this year in order to pay attention to the importance of communities as fertile knowledge spaces. where universities actually are not effective. The formal university is not effective there. Just as Juan David said, this is a completely different logic. Formal university cannot provide that because technology, we're talking about technological communities and they move faster. Traditionally, these are spaces where knowledge is fresh, is flowing freely. And on the other hand, open science. This year we have done the third session of science, open science. The third congress is going to be in November, and next year there's going to be a fourth, the fourth version that is probably going to be different from previous ones. But this is the path of innovation, just as Sarai Cordova says. The importance of outreach of open science in all spaces is a priority, and that's what we are doing. We do believe that this is very important. Looking ahead, that next year that we need to work more closely universities. There's plenty of room for growth, and also there's the possibility of the open government plan of action that is underway. There is one that we actually included there that has to do with open science, and it has to do with the way science is evaluated, taken as a model, those Brazilian experiences. And well, we're going to see whether in the end these things turn into commitments, and that would be highly interesting for the country. In regard to the communities, it's important to offer strengthening processes, not only in the public sector with university and also the private sector. All these topics are highly relevant this year and the next. So this is what I wanted to share with you, and so now we can have a conversation.
Sí, muchas gracias, Francisco.
Right, Francisco, thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation.
Dejar a nuestros
I want to encourage
participantes
our
a hacer
participants
preguntas en nuestro
to
chat.
include their questions in our chat. At the beginning,
Pero
people are
después aparecen preguntas
shy, but
y yo
afterwards,
me
there are
pregunto a
questions. I
ustedes,
wanted to ask you a question
las dos presentaciones
because I think that both presentations have as a common point
en la presentación de
university,
Juan
the
David,
academia.
yo me quedé
In Juan
pensando
David
que tenían
presentation,
ese acercamiento tan
I was
fuerte, ¿no?
thinking if we
De
do have
esa
this hardcore training of
cultura
this monoculture, one-sided culture,
académica, ¿no?
and this
Quizás podrías
mono
compartir un
technique,
poco de tu
could you please
recorrido
share
en esos
something
campos
about
tuyos, ¿no? De cómo
your
un científico que está tan
background
entrenado ahí
and your path? How is
podría
it that a science that is highly
empezar a
trained
hacerse más
in
abierto
that
a esas
environment, how a
posibilidades
discipline
y a
can
esos
become
entornos?
more open to
Porque
these new
realmente
environments?
sabemos que esto es una cuestión de
Because we see that
sensibilidad, de tener otro tipo de
this is a topic of
experiencia y una
sensitivity
conversación
and having a new type of
está
experience in our conversations
intentando
as
pensar
a
en
group
esta
that is
sensibilidad
trying to
y
think
son
about
cada
this
vez más
new
notorias
open
por el
science.
uso, ¿no? de
Day after
facilitadores,
day, we hear
mediadores,
this idea of
ingenieros
facilitators
y
and
ellos no son
mediators, and that
solucionadores, pero
engineers
podrían ahí
mm,
en esta otra sensibilidad
can
trabajar como
consider can be
facilitadores.
considered
Quizá
as
podrías compartir un poco
problem
de
solvers,
tu
but also
experiencia
facilitators.
y
Could you
hablar
share your
precisamente de
experience with us?
cómo
And I wanted to ask
sería
Francisco,
interesante que en el hub
because I think it is important that in the Quito
participen
Innovation
cinco
Hub,
universidades, ¿no?
there are
¿Cómo fue esa
5
experiencia de
universities
trabajar
joining.
desde la
How was
perspectiva
that experience of
participativa
working from a
en una universidad?
citizen
¿Qué
lab
apoyos
perspective at a
tenían? ¿Qué
university?
desafíos han
What
tenido?
sorts of
¿Cómo
support,
consideran
what sorts
que se
of
expresa
pitfalls,
ese
obstacles,
conocimiento que
hindrances
ustedes
have you
tienen para aplicar?
experienced? What another group or another society interested in doing the kind of work you do could begin? Shall I begin?
Bueno, si quieres empiezo yo, ya para cambiar. Bueno,
Okay, I will begin then.
dos cosas primero. El hub de
Well, there are
innovación
two things.
tiene un director
The Quito Innovation Hub has a directory that is made up of the directors of each university. If we don't have support from them, well, that would be the end of it. So far, there has been support. The other area that I was mentioning is the executive part of the operation, this executive organ. When we have this opening, well, the rest is all about proposals. And then the moment of beginning to work inside, one thing is the communities give you the free light, and after that, you start dipping into it. And then the question is how to make these calls be published among the universities. The communication units of every university needs to help you do the outreach. I don't know if it happens with you, the same thing happens with you, but these communication units at universities give priority and they depend on the maximum authority. So they don't pay attention to you.
Un trabajo arduo que hizo un colega, Cristian Guayasamín, que se encargaba justamente de eso. Nos reuníamos
This was hard work. Christian Guayasamín helped us with that.
y él establecía esa conexión.
And he established that connection. In some cases, it worked. In some others,
La rectora, la
talking to the university directors and deans was necessary.
orden, quizás sí. Ya.
So an order is given, and that's it. The first topic is how to communicate. Beyond our social media, universities need to do outreach to their students' database and their faculty and so on.
Es ya.
The other topic is to actually collaborate.
Y cada una tiene su
Usually in universities,
particularidad.
every university is particular, specific, and they often do it. And every university wants to be better than the next.
Dentro de la misma universidad,
Even within the same university, this hierarchy, whether you're a researcher at the first level or if you're an auxiliary. I remember in one of these projects there was a colleague that got invited to propose a project because she worked at a university and she was handling urban development topics. And when we saw that there was a very important person in the topic and she had to be acting as the promoter, she said, well, I cannot do this. I cannot lead a project where there is this person, this is a PhD, highly recognized, so no. So there was this hierarchy issue. We weren't always able to break through this thing. In some cases, we managed to work horizontally, and these were some of the things that we have to deal with. So I will leave it right there just to begin with.
Bueno, gracias, Francisco.
Thank you, Francisco. I would like to share this process that comes from a critical practice in engineering. I graduated, however, there's always been a relationship between, a connection between the public university, national state-funded university, and the social movements, and we owe those institutions this development, where you are recognized as a student, as a professional, not abstract or individual, but at a collective level. This is a country that also depends on these institutions. And several colleagues in the engineering faculty established a dialogue with other disciplines. We have been working around other disciplines, human sciences, social sciences, the arts, and we recognize that there needs to be a multidisciplinary dialogues out of it with other epistemologies and knowledge. And we shouldn't be just in our expertise and our monoculture. So we need to be critical facing that. And after that, I did a master's course on environment development in order to better understand how this technology
conocer y entender bien cómo es el que queremos entrar en esa rueda, ¿no? En ese mecanismo. Y después finalmente lo que
better serve society and we want to join that mechanism.
doctorado en ingeniería de nuevo comprender y visibilizar los procesos de innovación de las comunidades, en este caso
It's
indígenas,
important to
de
give more
refugiados,
visibility to the processes of communities, the processes of
República Colombiana y entender
refugees from Uganda and South Sudan, the communities in
desde esta ingeniería
Colombia,
capaces
and the
pensando
work from engineering for peace, their potentiality and desires. This narrative that is political changes because we are not subjects of problems, but subjects to potentialities and desires. Changing this role involves also changing the role of the collaborative processes.
sueños, con su tiempo,
People who are there with their dreams and their time, they need acknowledgement.
tratar de ir balanceando esa
So
relación,
somehow we can balance
que
that
podemos
relationship.
llamar colaboración,
We could call it
pues es siempre,
collaboration,
siempre, ¿no? Por
but
eso
there is always a power relationship. We're always trying to create
comunidades, pero siempre van a haber
collective processes. There is always going to be someone who wins more or loses or wins, and this is not recognized because sometimes we think we are
y con eso es suficiente, sino que también podemos
causing benefit for this society, but we need to continue asking ourselves
sobre todo desde, y esto nos enseña a
how
nosotros
the
en
processes are done. This is what tells us about the studies for peace, actions without harm.
que hacen más
Sometimes it's better to do an action, to carry out an action,
un daño emocional, un daño intelectual,
and not to actually cause harm.
que no, que también está bien. El no actuar también es una opción también.
Sometimes not acting is also an option.
Es un poco el recorrido.
So that's the background.
Muchas gracias, Juan. Incluso yo
Thank you, thank you very much, Juan.
con ese tema de
I also wanted to ask you about the harm, this topic of DAM. We also talked about tacit knowledge
el ejemplo del libro ahí de
and this example of the book of practices,
perdón,
the
cubano.
the
Entonces,
Cuban book.
hay esos
Sometimes
que tienen que ver con la memoria,
there are projects linked to memory
conocimiento tácito y transforman justamente en un
that
producto
codify this tacit knowledge
de cosa.
and they transform this knowledge into an actual article, a book, a specific product. Do you have a special concern of a reappropriation of this when tacit knowledge becomes codified because this open science, which is more
Por encima de productos
technical, practical, is always working on products, articles, books?
posible
Do you see any possible harm in regards to codification, the tacit knowledge codification? Yes, to be specific,
Unas potencialidades buenas, podemos
there are good potentialities
también, digamos, su forma
to involve
céntrica a través del
new audiences,
un poco su única forma de comprensión y
and it has to be with
sin embargo, también podemos
comprehension and validation. We can also stimulate many other epistemological forms. In this case, we thinking that many Afro-descendant
precisamente como mecanismo
communities in Colombia,
de su conocimiento. Y
how they communicate their knowledge and their teaching.
procesos multiformatos
We need to rethink multi-format processes. We're writing a text. We defended it, of course, but besides it, to besides when there are sound processes that somehow we can register some key projects and we can keep the audio so that the communities can actually use these resources
digamos,
in
otras
a two-way manner.
de una
When we are working with other languages, for example, giving them also validity. When we are
idioma indígena, la lengua
using
al mismo nivel,
indigenous languages
es una
at the same level,
produciendo una lengua
when we are reproducing a colonialist language in the territory,
entonces también
regardless of what our good intentions are, this would be causing harm over there. So sound spaces. This is another way to register, whether it is in Spanish or Portuguese. One does the same effort so that everything is registered in the indigenous language. We want to make it more dynamic. So those elements should be there. Yes, I've seen that in your work on technologies to embrace the sun, and they are also offered in two languages. We are nearing the end. I have a last question for Francisco that is in the chat. Congratulations for your initiative. I want to know what is the reach of OpenLabEC in Latin America? What is the reach out that you would like to have in Latin America, and whether you are considering interacting with other communities to advance? This is from Nicolas Paloponi. Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you for your question. This is an interesting question. Well, I don't know whether we have a Latin American reach out or scope. The free software communities, well, it is natural for them to have a scope. There's a free soul event that is done every year. We are on the 18th edition that is done in every country. Inevitably, technological communities and open source communities are connected. We are connected with some of them in Argentina, Mexico, not with every one of them, but we are in that process. And this is a natural process. And of course, we would like to connect with more communities and organizations that support our work in order to unite processes, where communities are not only considered as important actors in the ecosystem, in the technological ecosystem. There are some countries that are more advanced than others. And on the other hand, when we think about this discovering open science since 2019, since these days of outreach of free knowledge, we did it in an open way. We wanted to record them in order to move it forward so that this material could be seen afterwards. We thought it at country level. With the pandemic, in the virtual mode, it was something that came up naturally. There is a big open science community. There are many people who are open, and there are references in the region, and the people that we managed to connect with, well, thanks to them, we did those days, those sessions. There's an online collaboration done with many important actors, many references from Latin America, and we are somehow connected with the region in this subject of open science. That's why we decided to do the Congress. And the Congress is being done with colleagues from the region. We're going to continue working and moving ahead in that line, but probably at some point here is not going to be Openlab Ecuador, but Openlab Latam or Openlab Latin America, and this would be to respond to your question, Nicholas. Thank you very much. Thank you, Francisco. Thank you. We don't have any other questions in the chat, and we have the commitment that this format should be a bit shorter. So I wanted to know whether you guys have questions or comments. Otherwise, we would be ending and wrapping up today's session. I think Juan has left. His connection was weak. We want to thank Anna. We want to thank Anna for your invitation, and also the team of The Other Science Already Exists, Juan Pablo for his invitation, the Charisma Foundation, and we are willing and happy to help with these two things of helping the local communities in our countries, and to do away with this idea that an intelligent city is a city that is full of devices and automation. And in my computer, especially technology, these things that emerge, and people become experts in selling technology that is sold outside and abroad, not to develop the local talent. An intelligent city is a city that has local digital talent for itself, for the city itself. So that's our aim. And that's where we are helping. And we want to continue collaborating in open science.
Muchas gracias, Francisco. Cuenta con
Thank you very
nosotros
much, Francisco. You can count on us.
también conviviendo con nuestros obstáculos, pero también con nuestro ánimo, aquí estamos, ¿no? Bueno,
Here we are,
terminamos la sesión de
encourage you
hoy
to move
y
forward.
quiero invitarles
We
a
will
la
wrap up
próxima, será sobre
today, and I want to invite you to the next. It's going to be on climate change and citizen participation, citizen engagement. We will have two experiences with Ana Liu that is going to tell us about citizen science, climate change and participation, connecting connecting networks for common knowledge, and Francisco Arau, who is going to tell us about communitary centers for participation. And we will see each other in November at the same time. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Chao, chao, hasta luego.
Goodbye. Take care.